Good morning. I'll now call to order the Monday, November 20th, 2023 Town Council meeting. If you would please stand and join me with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First on the agenda is the approval of a memorandum of the November 6, 2023 regular council meeting minutes. A copy has been posted. Are there any questions from councilors? Otherwise, I would make a motion to approve. Second by Councilor Melton. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next is a request to speak on agenda item. Amy, do we have any requests to speak?
No, we do not.
All right. Moving along, Mayor Administration update. We have Deputy Mayor Pakel, Dan Hedden, and attorney with Baker Tilly.
Councilors, administration didn't have any updates, but we'd like to introduce Dan Hedden from Baker Tilly to give you an update on their work they've been performing.
Good morning.
Morning.
How do I operate the slideshow?
I think Joe has it. If you wouldn't mind, just give your name and all that stuff.
All right. Good morning. My name is Dan Hedden. I'm a partner at Baker Tilly. We are a municipal advisory firm located. Our office is located here in central Indiana and Indianapolis. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. We've been engaged with the town since June to help you with 2 projects. One is the bank reconciliation, transitioning you back into your Keystone environment and working through the issues and the headwinds that you've been facing since April of 2021 with your software conversions. And also to work with the town to document your internal control processes in accordance with the Indiana State Board of Accounts Internal Controls Manual. We're going to give you an update on both of those today. I think what you're going to gather from this presentation is a lot of encouraging news. We've got a lot done. We are transitioning to the what we call a wrap-up phase of the bank reconciliation project, and we'll be delivering the internal controls project before the end of the year as agreed. As mentioned, I am from Baker Tilly. Our firm, just so that there's awareness in the room, we focus all day, every day on local governments in our office. Joined with me today is Todd Caldwell. Todd's got decades of experience in Indiana local government and compliance, reporting, and operations, all those key elements that we're addressing in this project. And also with us today is Brett Luker. Brett's technology experience has helped us to perform our tasks efficiently and able to document our work. So the 3 of us together have been working with your finance office, with the mayor's office, and with stakeholders to identify and make adjustments and work through these projects together. Next slide, please. This slide is our scope of work from the 2 agreements that we have. That one was signed June 29th. The internal controls agreement, I believe, was signed in August. So I know you've been living with this for about 2.5 years. We've been engaged for just under 6 months, or just right about 6 months. So it has taken time to get through all of the data that we've gotten through, but we are pleased with where we are, and we're also encouraged about the next steps. Next slide, please. Actually, you can go 2 slides. So just a quick overview to level set the room and what we've been doing. The town currently has about 80 funds that you deal with on a daily basis to process your operations, pay your debt, carry out your capital projects, process your internal things like payroll. Our scope has been in what are identified in Keystone as 3 banks: Bank 0, Bank 1, and Bank 2. Bank 0 is by far your largest and most active bank account and fund. It covers 57 funds of your town across 3 bank statements. Your wastewater has 4 funds across 2 bank statements, and then the payroll account is a 1-to-1 relationship. We've analyzed all of that activity. The findings that we are finding, we can see that a lot of them have accumulated over a very long period of time, primarily since going into OpenGov and then transitioning back to Keystone. So we've looked at all of that for you since that time, and I'll give a quick update on that later. Next slide, please.
Is it unusual to have that many bank accounts, that many
That
funds?
many bank accounts and funds? No.
Okay.
No. So this is the summary of the reconciliation. And what I want to emphasize on this slide is that we have looked at literally 100% of every transaction that's gone through Keystone for the year. That totals, when you think of receipts in and receipts out, it's about $140 million worth of transactions. All of them have gone through our proof process where we have identified if that transaction reconciles to the bank as is or not. If it's an or not, it goes onto a list. The list is, we work the list with your local officials and our experience to get that list as small as possible. So we have gone through that process, and where we are now is that we have reconciled 99.955% of all transactions for the year. So the remaining 28,000, we know what they are. We have them listed. They are identified. What we're looking for is, do we need to make any adjustments? Are there any corrections that need to be made to the ledger? Any additional information that needs to go into your ledger, or are there things that are duplicate? So we're still working through that final small group. The next slide is the same information, but just in picture form. I like to show this because I think we try to get across a concept of materiality. We're not issuing an opinion on your work. That's the role of the Indiana State Board of Accounts. But there comes a time where the work that we do for you, we want to keep it in the value category. With this amount of remaining reconciliation, we have a suggestion for you later in the presentation as to what we would like to do so that we can move on to the last two steps of our project that are still both value add. So this slide shows there is a very, very tiny little red sliver there of that represents the $28,000 that, again, we've identified it. We know what the transactions are. We just need to work them. So it's natural to ask, next slide, please. What have we found? So I wanted to take the next few minutes and just go through some of the findings that we have and explain how that has impacted your daily operations, how it has impacted the reconciliations, and also what we're doing now or what we already have done to address those. Many of these are still in progress, just simply because of we're working in real time, but we want to give some assurance to the council and to the public that the issues that we're finding, that we are able to address them and resolve them so that they don't come back. And the first is ACH bond payments and transfers. In total, you have, I think, about 20, a combination of debt and leases, and each one of those has covenants that you have to comply with. And those covenants require that you assemble dollars, put them into a sinking fund or a debt payment fund, and then those dollars then get used to pay the debt, to pay the principal, the interest, and any paying agent fees. So we haven't found any issues where the debts haven't been getting paid, that the bond holders and your debt holders are being paid as expected. But we are finding, and we did find examples where the transfers or the movement of money within your ledgers or even within your banks wasn't complete all the way through. So as we found those, again, through our proof process, it hit our list. We talked about it with your finance office. We made the adjustments or are making the adjustments that are required to bring all that back in line. But taking that finding and turning it into experience and then to process improvement, we're drafting a document that will help to spell out for each debt and each lease exactly where does the dollar come from, what accounts should be used for the transfers out, what accounts should be used for the transfers in, how do you account for the principal and interest, and which bank account it should come from and to in those cases. But with 20 different debt issues, could be 20 different sets of instructions. So that is in progress. The second finding relates to your P card system. P card systems are used really all over the state very effectively. And in your case, there was a setup issue that I'll explain, that we tracked throughout the course of 2023 doing our analysis, but we feel it has been corrected and won't be an issue going forward. So what happened was when the system was set up, there was a template or a mask created that said that a wastewater employee, any transactions that a wastewater employee processes on a purchase card, that intuitively those would be charged to the wastewater utility. Well, when that mask was carried forward to the town, it should have been changed so that the town employees are charged to the town. And in all but just a couple instances, that's what happened. But there were two or three employees where their town transactions were charged to the wastewater utility. And that's not anything that we did. We're not necessarily, your finance office spent time talking to your vendor about it, and that's what got it corrected. But through the bank reconciliation process, we would see payments coming out of the wastewater bank account for town employee spending. Now, it was accounted for correctly on your books. So this was an issue where the bank said it paid for something that actually was accounted for in the general. So we've had to clean that up. So this is something that took us a little bit of time to work through and reason through. But as soon as we spoke with management and understood the story, we kind of got behind it and were able to figure it out and move through it. Next slide, please.
Can I ask you a quick B-card question? I know you guys are
Sure.
forensic accountants, not policymakers, but one of the concerns this council has had, it was pitched to us, was the distribution of P cards across a wide swath of employees to allow them to make easier transactions rather than having to go to a manager or department head to borrow that card to run that. And we were told that is a norm amongst communities, peer communities. Is that, as you deal with other governments, something you see often, that this distribution of P cards down to all levels of employees? Or do you typically, the only concern being, I'm less concerned about fraud, although that's always up there, but more concerned about, accidental transactions or sort of lack of accountability to transactions, as you have to deal with 150 P cards versus 15.
Sure. I don't have an answer for you on the level of organization that, what level of employee gets P cards in other organizations that are using them. That's not a question I've received before, and I don't have a good answer for you.
Okay.
We can do some anecdotal research and report back.
Yeah, I mean, would you, because this was proposed to us by a former CFO, I'm just looking for a best practice, right? I mean, if
Sure.
this really is a recommendation and something that makes it easier for all involved, right? The purchaser, finance, behind the scenes counsel, there's no issues. But if there is a potential unknown there, it'd be just good to know that, for this council, next council, to understand if that's an ordinance that needs to be amended to support that. I appreciate you taking that away if you don't know the answer right now.
Sure.
I think that was also a concern of the State Board of Accounts, Heather, if I'm,
That's correct.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think Mr. Caldwell in his formal role may have been part of a conversation about that. We did have conversation at the State Board of Accounts level about, what number of employees versus the old sort of credit card checkout program that the town had prior to that.
Sure. But I think I'm going to go off on a short tangent, and I'll come right back to the presentation. Your purchase card policy that you have, I forget the ordinance number, but we've read through that, and it does hit on many of the best practices, or really all the best practices that you need for purchase cards. So that's just a matter of the internal control procedures to make sure that they're effective as you're actually utilizing those cards. So the number of employees with them and the distribution is a matter for your discussion, but we can certainly provide the administration, council, more information on purchase card programs. They're also, I'm not sure who manages your purchase card program, but if you needed to, I'm sure that we could organize a presentation of best practice on purchase cards for you.
As a part of your audit, are you able to validate? Is one thing to have the best practice for the internal control in the ordinance, but also are you auditing the implementation of that relative to the ordinance? In other words, if we put the 5 best practices in, those are actually being followed.
We're just technicality. We're not auditing.
Okay. Yeah, maybe that's the wrong word.
But I understand the spirit of your question.
Yeah.
when at this stage of the project, we are going through and looking at the transactions that flow through the bank and making sure that they are reconciled into the ledger. So we are at the stage now where we want to go to that, where we need to go to the next step and make sure that all those transactions are consistent and accurate. We have not designed any procedures to test the processes or the controls over a purchase card or a claim or anything of that nature. At this stage, our objective is to be able to accurately report that the dollars in the bank reconcile to the dollars that are on your ledger. The next step is to make sure that the dollars on your ledger are in the right appropriation lines and the right receipt lines. So in the course of doing that, we may see information that leads us to identify a deficient process or deficient procedure. And at that point, we would work to mitigate it, but we're not going to go looking for anything in particular.
Is that, and I'm sorry, I'm just going on and on about this, but it's something I think is very important. Is it in your, because you're looking at the sheer volume of data that's coming through, will inaccuracies in that data identify internal controls that are needed, or is it a best practice and maybe outside of your scope, it needs to be inside your scope to also go in and do that internal control check to make sure that we are doing things correctly so future transactions are not errors?
You are correct that in the scope of what we have in front of you, that is not included.
Okay.
If you wanted to do an internal audit over your information, you can.
Unless it's not the information, it's more the controls, right? Because the DLGF will do the
which generate the information.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So if we wanted to do an internal control audit, we could. That's designed under internal audit standards and follows internal audit guidance. So it's definitely a more formal process than what we're going through here. And that more formal process, as you know, would have a cost associated with it.
Sure. Sure.
So for now, the purpose of this phase is that we've got to get back to the dollars that come in are reconciled, the dollars that go out are accounted for, that everything makes sense, that the transparency into your internal portals, into the state portals, and your annual financial report that you issue every year, that all of those are strong. So then if you want to go to the next level and do some internal control testing or some internal audit testing, that's certainly something that you can consider. Next slide, please. So golf, this is just one where we want to make some small adjustments and tweaks. One of them to actually our process, but the other two, how the information is communicated. So generally speaking, every day, the golf course generates dollars. They generate dollars that they bring in through cash or credit cards for merchandise, greens fees, cart rentals, sales tax. All that stuff is tracked every day. Haven't found any issues with that. Then at the end of the month, there's a summary that comes to the finance office that says, here's our monthly activity. And that's what goes into the ledger. So from a bank reconciliation process, we feel we don't see any issues with that conceptually, except for when it comes to credit cards. You get a credit card today, but you don't necessarily get the money for that credit card until sometimes it's tomorrow, sometimes it's the next day, sometimes it's the following day. That's what's creating the reconciliation problems for this particular department, is that because of the credit card activity and because of the timing of that credit card activity, we can't just neatly look at the bank statement, take all of the golf activity, add it together and equal that monthly summary. So we've got to go back and adjust that process a little bit to create that additional level of granularity that you need in the finance office so that you can truly reconcile. Permits, next slide, please. Similar concept, but different. Permits can be paid by cash, credit cards, or check. And the payment types are entered into Keystone, but they don't show up on the report that we use to reconcile. So in our experience, we work with Keystone all over the state and very familiar with it. Whenever we have a project like this, we use what's called the combination report out of Keystone. And the combination report, we like it because it proves to us every receipt, or details for us every receipt, in every disbursement that goes to the system. It gives us a check number, it gives us a vendor, it gives us a receipt number, all of those things that we need for our work. But it doesn't tell us if the receipt is cash, check, or credit card. So what we've had to do for permits and for other things is we have modified our reconciliation procedure to use what's called the receipt transaction list. So this is something that we'll continue to work with the finance office on a procedure for reconciling the permits to make sure that as they come in, that they're reconciled and those credit card timing issues are accounted for each month. And I think the final finding for discussion today are energy payments. Like most communities, you have a resolution or an ordinance in place that allows you to pay certain routine and recurring services in advance of council meeting to avoid late penalties and late payment fees, or for more routine things. That flexibility allows you to operate more efficiently. What we found in the reconciliation is that, again, the vendors got paid on time, but the follow-up recording in the ledger wasn't 100% of the time. So we found examples where a payment to Duke or a payment to Centerpoint, we could see the payment paid, but we didn't see it in the ledger. So we've gone back and we've accounted for all that. And we've talked about what causes it. And we'll work with the departments and with the finance office for a more robust process around those items to make sure that they're accounted for each month. So I want to talk about next steps. And this is an important discussion from our standpoint because we really don't view this as done until you're posting your reconciliations into Gateway each month, about 45 days after the end of each month as required, and until you have an annual financial report that accurately reflects your activity for the year, your receivables, your payables, your debt activity, your grant activity, and capital assets. So our agreement helps you through that process. And we want to shift our work to focusing with you on the processes and procedures that will correct this permanently, and then also help you to complete your annual report and your monthly filings. So as I stated earlier, there is a list of stuff that we're still looking into. And as accountants, us three sitting here, we're happy to chase down $1, but we also realize that it's your dollars that are spending for us to chase $1. So we want to be tactical here. We can never say that we're going to stop looking, but our suggestion is that we take that information, your finance office investigates it as time permits. We can review their findings with them and help them with any remaining adjustments that are on that list. We do have one more day planned to focus on the general checking. And then after that, my suggestion is that we shift our focus to your processes, your procedures, your internal control implementation, and your reporting. So all of that is summarized somehow on the schedule. Now, I want to give a brief update on the internal control project. I don't have a deliverable for you today, but the document that we've created is based on interviews of your finance office, and we would like to interview others over time, maybe in the next version of the report. But the approach that we use is the guidance that the state provided laid out 3 objectives, 5 components, 17 principles, and 110 considerations of internal controls. We've interviewed on all of those for our draft. So where there's a process or a procedure or an internal control that exists, we've either noted it, copied it, or included it in the report. Now, in the course of doing that, when we have discussion points, there may be a discussion point where we're like, well, you really don't have this, but you should. So those are things that we're going to suggest that you get in place earlier. And those are in the category of higher risk, higher need equals earlier implementation. So the internal control project, we have drafted it. We shared the rough cut with the working group so we can get feedback just to make sure we heard everything correctly. We'll refine that and get it distributed, and you'll have it in your hands before the end of the year. I will emphasize and stress that the internal control project is never complete because internal controls are never final. But having a structure around your internal controls where you can reliably go to a document to find if you have a control in place over bank reconciliations or a control in place over grant accounting and reporting. This document is that hub. You can go to the next slide, please. And I believe this may be my final slide. It is my final slide. So for the internal control project, our suggestions so far are all of the stuff we're talking about with the bank reconciliation and the process improvements, the procedures that we're drafting, all of those will go into your internal control document and live there, and updates will be updated into there. Whether they're in whole or by reference, they'll be part of your internal control document. The second point on this slide is about federal grants. There's more and more federal dollars coming through local government, primarily related to the American Rescue Plan, the infrastructure bill. There are units of government that aren't used to getting this much federal dollars. So the reporting, the compliance, and the requirements around those federal dollars, they may exist in practice, but they're not in written form. And that's what we're seeing here. We are suggesting and will encourage written policies and procedures over how you handle your federal funds. You did have a 2022 audit over your ARPA and you received a clean opinion and no findings. So we're not starting in a hole here, but this is part of going good to great suggestion. And then finally, the last bullet points I've touched on earlier about the three objectives of an internal control system are compliance, reporting, and operations. Compliance, got to file those gateway reports within 45 days after the end of the year. You've got to file your annual detail on time. You've got to do the annual financial report. Those are the biggest compliance matters for the town from the perspective of your external auditors. Your internal reporting and your transparency tools here really focus around your revenue reports and your appropriation reports from Keystone that allow the departments, the administration, legislative body to see what's happening against which appropriations. Our focus, our suggestion is to emphasize that here in the near term to ensure that you get that transparency, that you return to that level that you had for years and years prior to your OpenGov experience. I'm subject to any questions that you may have.
Dan, on our website, we still show fund reports as unreconciled. Do you know when that will change, or is that even relevant at this point?
It's relevant to the extent that if your policy is to post your fund report onto your website. So we have, and on one of the slides, I should have pointed it out at the time, but for Bank 0, Bank 1, and Bank 2, Bank 1 and Bank 2, we're reconciled through October. Bank 0, we have our October proofs done, but our reconciliation is complete through September. So those are current. Those flow into your fund report. So from that perspective, you are back to current on reconciliations. It doesn't mean that all reconciling items have been fully researched and posted. Sure. But we're not dealing with February transactions anymore. We're dealing with November and October transactions. So it's not my authority to say that it'll be there tomorrow or Thursday or next Wednesday, but we're at the point where that's where I want to switch to. I think our work for the town at this point is better spent continuing to help and support for the remaining 28,000, but shift to focus on what needs to be loaded and when. Does it look right? Is it accurate? And get you back to that before the end of this year.
Yeah, well, I certainly appreciate the work that you guys are doing. The presentation, I mean, as you'll recall from our phone call back in 22, this is something that has been on our radar. So I appreciate the work. I think it sets us up for opportunity for additional, rules, procedures and legislation and things that this administration wants and probably the new administration will want. It just makes me feel a lot better about even entertaining those things. So I appreciate it. Are there any questions or anything from counselors? All right. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Appreciate it. All right, up next on the agenda is town council update. Are there any updates from counselors?
I mean, I'd like to go through the mayor's veto of our ARPA spending plan. And I can do it now, or I can do it. We've got a new ARPA spending plan coming up. I don't know, President Plunkett, if you got a preference one way or the other, and when you want to unleash me on this.
I don't have a preference. Are there any other counselors that have updates that would take,
All right, let's go. So the last meeting, we approved an ARPA spending plan that we'd spent a lot of time on. The mayor vetoed it, which was disappointing. And I know that she really doesn't attend these meetings. So I'm not quite sure why I spend so much time rebutting her social media posts. But I do want to go on the record, just so everyone's armed with the facts of this matter. They can draw their own conclusion. Going back a little bit in history here. So the administration presented a $12 million budget deficit on August 21st, 2023. That was the last time I have heard or seen Mayor Styron was in that meeting in any capacity, phone, text, in person, whatever. The council, we pushed back on that because it was an unsustainable budget. This was going to create problems for future councils, future administrations with spending levels that would eventually lead to draconian cuts in the services we were going to have. That was verified by Crow. They said this is not a sustainable budget. So at our September 19th meeting, I presented a plan that would take that budget deficit down to zero using ARPA funds as well as cuts to fully balance that budget and keep our mission critical spending. As a result of that, Councillor Choi volunteered to help me. We worked with Deputy Mayor Paquel on this plan, and we went through a negotiation. We agreed that a portion of things that were going to be cut from the budget were going to be moved into the ARPA plan. It was going to be a reduced deficit. There'd still be a little bit of deficit, and it was going to be, most importantly, sustainable. And I was told explicitly by Deputy Mayor Paquel that he is authorized to speak for Mayor Styron and speaks with her daily when she's not in town. So based on this agreement, the council did pass that budget unanimously, and we also did it expeditiously, way sooner than we needed to, based on the request of the administration. So I then created, based on the budget agreement, this ARPA plan with projects proposed by the council and department heads. That was present, and these are projects that were presented by the mayor in the budget workshop as the basis for this ARPA spending plan. So there should have been zero surprises in this post. In her Facebook post, she said the town council has not made community involvement a priority. This year, there has not been any ARPA public forums related to the current ARPA plan. So I never have accused the mayor of not being smart, but she's certainly manipulative in her messaging. So you have to pay attention to the details, because that is an accurate statement. We have not had any public forums, but the key word is this year. So those forums happened the previous year, the last being October 24th, as we were going through and trying to get community input on how they wanted to see the ARPA spending plan. So the government certainly can take time to get through everything, but the feedback helped drive this plan and the final ARPA plan that we're going to talk about here a little bit. Besides the three nonprofits that presented at the meeting, the number one feedback that we got was trails. And you'll notice this plan provides a whole lot of trails. And the ARPA plan has also been discussed in no fewer than 4 town council meetings, which the mayor has not chosen to attend any of those. In her press release, and the only dialogue I get from her is press releases, I'm just going to be honest. In her veto, it says, I have consistently communicated to town council the flaws in this ARPA spending plan. Have any of you heard or seen from the mayor in August? And I'm not trying to be grandstanding. Like, if she may not communicate to me, because I know she doesn't like me, but is she communicating this to any of you? I didn't think so. So if she's stating she's communicating to us through deputy mayor, We've already agreed on this plan. So it's hard to believe that he speaks for her because as soon as she gets involved, all these agreements go out the window. And I don't blame the deputy mayor. I think he's caught in a bad situation. Everything I've heard from department heads, from employees, is he's doing an admirable job of running the town. But he's getting his marching orders. And, however he wants to implement them, he's doing that. This does not make for communication. So for example, at our last meeting, the deputy mayor was scheduled to speak at ARPA, and his comment was, quote, "I'm going to table my second point. I'll wait on that." Okay, about the ARPA conversation, I'll table that to the end of until after the meeting. That's the direct quote in there. I've not heard another peep from the deputy mayor until we got that veto on November 16th. I assume no other councilors have heard from this. You've come up to the lectern. I'm not sure why. I haven't asked you to come up to the lectern.
Well, you're
This is
speaking
this is not a dialogue. So further in her veto, she states that, quote, "The infrastructure project and initiatives funded in this plan are."
Andy, I didn't know you were up here. This is inappropriate.
I'm sorry.
It's inappropriate for you to be up here right now. This is not your.
You're putting words in my mouth.
Well, no,
I'm
no,
explaining
hold on
to
a
you the
second.
situation.
We will have order in this, and would you please take a seat, please? Thank you.
So further in her veto, she states, quote, "The infrastructure projects and initiatives funded in this plan are 2024 projects, not 2023 projects." Yes, of course they are. They were cut from her own proposed 2024 budget during this process. So they're 2024 projects. That's what the 2024 budget is. Just so we're all aware of the projects the mayor no longer thinks are important to this community. So $720,000 in DPW equipment replacement, 1.15 million in new pathway constructions for Cobblestone Lakes, Oak Street and Ford Road, $30,000 for the town hall parking lot, $150,000 for our transportation plan, $300,000 for our comprehensive plan, $510,000 in grants to Z-Works, the Chamber of Commerce and the Cultural District, which support the Brick Street Market, Street Dance, Christmas in the Village, support our startup community, and the Summer Concert Series. And for clarity, the Summer Concert Series is the only thing in this plan that was not proposed by Mayor Styron herself in her original budget. It was asked by the Cultural District in our ARPA public forum, and again in July when they came to this council and asked for this money. And it was also something that was previously supported by the Styron administration. So these aren't pet projects. As a quick refresher, for the budget process, it starts with the mayor. So everything in here, she came up with and came to us with the exception of the Summer Concert Series. She works with the department heads. They put together their priorities. This does not involve the council. We review it once it's put together. So this means the mayor in her veto is vetoing the very items she proposed in August and requested to be a part of the budget. And the last part, and this really ticks me off. The last part of what was in that veto was $366,000 for self-contained breathing apparatus for the fire department. Those expire next year, okay? These are things that keep our first responders safe. So they're navigating smoke.
Andy,
They're navigating
please.
chemical. So
If you keep doing these outbursts, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor McKell. You have to have these. If Deputy Mayor McKell noted, these were cut from the budget to be moved into the ARPA plan. We're not going to cut mission critical items for our first responders out of the budget. Apparently though have been vetoed. You can't share these things. The last meeting, we approved half of the appropriation to get these done. The ARPA plan was the other part of that appropriation. I'd also like to point out that at no point since we passed in 2022, the one-time bonus for our employees for the COVID relief, has the administration provided any ARPA funding proposal of their own. So this is not a battle of different versions of money, either an individual line item or broad spending plans. We've got nothing. Our plan comes from public input from the meetings. The administration did not participate in those. And the requests from the administration in the budget and the council into this plan with money that will expire. And here's the most baffling thing. She actually signed the non-DLGF plan that has all the spending in it that she vetoed. So again, a little bit more government technical history. We submit our budgets to the DLGF for approval. Some budget things don't require state approval. So those are things like self-funded entities like the golf course, federal dollars like ARPA. So the last meeting, we passed the non-DLGF budget that was presented to us by the administration. And it had the exact same ARPA line items in it that she vetoed, but she then passed the budget. So I'm pretty sure she doesn't realize that. That's a bit of an oops. I don't think we need to override this veto, because what's going to happen here later on today in this meeting is that these same things she vetoed have been packaged up with the original ARPA ordinance. So that includes the original bonuses to the employees, the first round of spending, and I'm going to talk about the second round of spending here a little bit later. She can own this veto as a part of her legacy. But I just think it's very important for those folks in the audience, for folks watching online, for people to understand what the implications of this veto have. And if we were to not move forward with anything, we would not have all of those things, as well as have money that is federally funded that will expire. So I'm a little fired up about this, but I do know that we're going to get this fixed. So I appreciate your patience as I went through that. But
Thank you for that. Any other updates from counselors? All right. We'll move on to old business. The first item of old business is the consideration of an ordinance to revise the food and beverage fund. Tax fund uses, I should say. This is ordinance 2023-26. This is a final reading. Heather, if you want to give us just a quick rundown on this.
Yes,
Please.
just as a reminder, this is basically aligning our food and beverage ordinance to state statute directly. We're picking up the language that basically allows it to be used for any government purpose, which broadens the ability of our use of food and beverage funds in the town for the community grants and for other purposes. There is one request for an amendment that I have. I noticed in reviewing this yesterday that the section numbering is off. So I'd like to change starting it's missing number 2, which I'm assuming happened during a redlining. So I'd just like to have the sections renumbered in order.
Any questions for Heather?
No, just a quick comment. It kind of ties into what Councilor Garrett just went through. Part of the mayor's editorial, if you will, about her veto was that the grants to the chamber, to Z-Works, and to the cultural district didn't go through her prescribed process. I'm just going to point this out. The whole reason we are currently revising this ordinance is because the mayor's prescribed process was not legal. It did not, the criteria she set forth and that approved these unfortunate nonprofits that kind of got caught in the mix. The criteria she set forth were not legal. So we are fixing her issue with this so that we can get the money to those organizations that were promised the money by the administration. Thank you.
Any other questions for counselors? Or for Heather, or conversation from counselor? Heather, I'll try to get this right. I will make a motion to approve on final reading ordinance 2023-26 with the modification of aligning the appropriate numbering.
Correct.
For sections.
That's good. Yeah.
Is that good?
Yep.
All right. Second by Vice President Burke. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next is a consideration of the fall 2023 community enrichment grants. We've obviously heard this before, and if you can tell, the first old business item was an effort to move this along as well. So are there any questions from counselors?
I'll make a motion to approve.
First by Counselor Trailer. I'll second that. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next is a consideration of an ordinance amending the 2023 salary ordinance. This is ordinance 2023-27. This is a final reading. We have Director of Finance and Records Cindy Poor here. If there are any questions. If there are no questions, I would entertain a motion.
Motion to approve ordinance. I'm sorry.
Yeah, ordinance 2023-27.
First from Counselor Melton,
Second.
second by Counselor Garrett. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed. Moving along, up next is the consideration of the 2024 salary ordinance. This is ordinance 2023-28. This is also a final reading. If there are questions for counselors, we have Director of Human Resources, Joe Keel here. Are there any questions from counselors? Then I would make a motion to approve ordinance 2023-28 on final reading. A second by Counselor Colt. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed. All right. Up next, we have first item of new business. We have the consideration of a reappropriation resolution. This is resolution 2023-23. As I introduce this, I wouldn't mind having Director of Finance Cindy Poor come up because I got a few procedural questions probably for her. Councilors, this resolution is an effort to resolve an employment matter that sets an important and relevant precedent, in my opinion, when a mayor attempts to circumvent the reorganization by removing a department head without following the appropriate steps and adhering to the rules of the resident approved reorganization for our town. As this council will recall, the fire chief's participation in this litigation matter was vital to our success in both the initial filing by the mayor as well as the subsequent appeal. While I want to be careful not to step outside of any confidentiality clauses in the agreement, have received public comment from this council as well as many others that we set a dangerous precedent for allowing town staff to fight battles with their sometimes limited resources, while the mayor and town council have virtually unlimited resources to fight these fights. This is an honest attempt to make the chief whole for his fight to uphold the tenets of the reorganization with us and nothing more. And I appreciate his patience. I appreciate Councilor Traylor's patience. And we have both attorney Mark Cranley, who is our attorney, as well as the fire chief's attorney present. If there are any questions for them, I would again, please note that there is a confidentiality clause that we need to respect. And I would hope that if we start to get close to that, either one of these attorneys certainly have my permission to stand up and shout. So with that being said, I think it's abundantly clear here, the effort of this council has been for quite some time to fix this and wrap this up. My question, Cindy, is admittedly on last week trying to get this on the agenda, knowing that we've got publication timelines for additional appropriations. My attempt was to essentially reappropriate money from the non-department legal budget to the town council legal budget in an effort to pay this. I see that the resolution itself reads a different department. So we would need to, should we decide to go this route with this resolution, we would need to update the 101-330-366 to the 101-999-311. So I realize that would be the first step we would have to do if that's the route this council chooses to take. So I guess my question is this, are you in a position, and Heather, maybe you could weigh in as well, and Mark and Jeff, if we get there, is this the right procedural step to take, or should we just amend a claim and pay this out of the non-department legal budget?
First off, I would say that we cannot do a reappropriation between departments. So my recommendation would be just to pay it out of the non-departmental legal fee line and skip the reappropriation process.
So then we would just pay that out of the 101-999-311.
Correct.
Heather, do you see anything wrong with that, or procedurally is that?
No, I agree with Cindy. That works fine.
I guess my next question is, we obviously have the authority to pull a claim on a claim sheet. And we've moved claims to the bottom of this agenda for this particular reason. Can we add a claim to this claims ledger and have the appropriate form submitted today to have this added to this ledger?
Honestly, I believe that would be your choice to do. So we would just need to make sure that when the claims register is approved, that it is amended with the new total dollar amount and adding that line item.
And then just making sure that Cindy's given all the appropriate documentation so that she would have this as well as the actual claims invoice.
That's correct.
Again, I know this is somewhat of a delicate balancing act here. Are there any questions from counselors or any, I guess I will give you just a backdrop. I mean, we've been trying to get this done for quite some time. So the only way I knew to do this was to put it on the calendar, put it on the agenda and talk about it and hash it out and figure out what we need to do. So that's why we're here.
Is there any, so we are covering legal expenses for a town employee regarding a legal matter. Heather, is there anything unusual about doing that? That seems pretty typical, right? That if it was a personal matter for an employee outside of the scope of their job, we're not covering that. But it is fairly typical for local government, if there are legal expenses incurred related to that person's job, that the town or an employer in general would cover those charges, correct?
Yeah, yes, I think that's right. And I'm getting a head nod from Mark as well. I mean, it's a very different situation because in this case, it wasn't something arising from the course of their duties to the town, but rather they were part of a lawsuit, filed from one town individual to another town individual. But yes, I think it's more than appropriate. And I've not been part of the detailed settlement discussions, but I understand that this has been part of those discussions for a significant period of time.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from counselors? So I guess at this point, I would just remove the consideration. Do I need to make a motion to remove the consideration of the ordinance, Heather, or?
Yeah, I would.
And then just so that it's on record there and then just amend the claims at the end of the meeting? Okay, so I'll make a motion to remove the consideration of the reappropriation resolution 2023-23. I get a second from Vice President Burke. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed. Thank you. Up next is a consideration of an additional appropriation resolution for police and finance. This is resolution 2023-24. We have Cindy Poor, Director of Finance and Records.
Hi. The police additional appropriation, whenever the officers assist with an event, their pay comes out of the overtime line, but then they in turn invoice the organization to get payment for the time they spent there at the event. This is just putting what revenue we've received from those invoices back into the overtime line. For finance, this is for phase 2 of Baker Tilly for them to continue doing what they're doing with the reconciliations and help to build processes.
The only comment I think I have, and these are both make all the sense in the world, and I appreciate Baker Tilly's comments today. I think for future mayor, future council, the idea of going just a little bit deeper on internal controls, just to make sure that we're doing best practices that's maybe outside the scope, would be a good future project. But I was glad to have them involved.
This is a public hearing. I approve publication of notice of public hearing. At this point, I would open the public hearing. If there's any members from the public who would like to comment. I haven't seen none. I will close the public hearing. Any other questions from Cindy, or I would actually call for a motion at this point?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
I got a first by Counselor Garrett, a second by Counselor Trailer. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you.
Up next is a consideration of a resolution for transfer of real property in the town of Zionsville, Indiana, which is and specifically for Lions Park. This is resolution 2023-25. We have Jared Logson, Superintendent of Parks and Recreation. Good morning, Jared.
Morning, councilors. Zionsville parks continue to expand to meet the needs and demand of our growing community. To date, Zionsville Parks and Recreation Department maintains 500 acres throughout Eagle Township. With our recent rail trail expansion, Overly Warman Park, Zionsville Road Trailhead, and future Carpenter Nature Reserve, we must prioritize our resources to maintain the level of service our community continues to enjoy. In 1962, when our community and park system was much smaller, Lions Park donated 0.65 acres to the town to replace tennis courts that were being removed from Lincoln Park. 61 years later, our community has changed a lot, but Lions Park continues to be a destination for Zionsville Little League, annual festivals, and community celebrations. This year, Lions Park acquired an additional 5 acres that will soon benefit our residents through new recreational opportunities and amenities. Currently, the Zionsville Parks and Recreation Department and Park Board agree it is advantageous to transfer back this 0.65 parcel to allow the Parks Department to remove itself from within Lions Park, reallocate resources to other portions of our growing park system, and most importantly, allow the Lions Park Board uninterrupted access to the full potential of their park as they master plan and develop their expanding parkland. In recent years, the Parks Department has improved this parcel with a tot lot playground, water fountain, and resurfaced tennis courts and added a new pickleball court. We appreciate your consideration on this matter and will work with Lions Park, if approved, to ensure that the grounds are maintained in an appropriate status as they're transferred to the Lions Park. We also have Gene Thompson and representatives of Lions Park Board here if there are any questions beyond me.
So Jared, and I don't know that a lot of people know this, but the little back corner of Lions Park is run by you, owned by the town. By this transfer, I'm assuming this is the little kid playground, the tennis courts, the pickleball. Will the town sort of officially, like, will Lions Park at that point be in its entirety there? The town won't have any little portions of it?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
So removing ourselves from that little insertion we have within the grand park.
Great. I mean, Lions do such a nice job with the park. If we can, if you want more of it, Gene, great.
Thank you, Jared. Are there any questions for Jared?
Just for the record, the Lions Club is supportive of this, I assume. I see Mr. Thompson coming up.
Gene Thompson, Zionsville Lions Park Corporation. We've been discussing an idea for months or so now with Jared. I've made a comment to him that if he could throw in an elephant that our board of directors about 2 weeks ago, and they did not take a final vote on it. I have a meeting scheduled with Jared tomorrow. We're happy to serve the community in any capacity we can.
So I guess, should we continue this until they have that meeting? Or are you guys?
Sounds like we would, well, that's a good point. Like, we would accept it. I guess if they reject it, I guess we have to get it back.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. If
Well,
the Lions says, if the Lions Club say their committee says that they don't want it.
I think we are, if they reject the transfer, because that would be through a transfer agreement, then it would continue with the ownership with the town.
Okay.
Yeah, just don't
I
sign.
don't know that there would be any need to continue this, Jared. I don't think so. I mean,
Yeah, if they choose not to accept it, we'll continue to maintain it within our operations.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good by me. Any other questions for Jared? I'd make a motion to approve resolution 2023-25. Second by Vice President Burke. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed. Thanks, Jared. All right, we have up next is a consideration of the Zionsville Redevelopment Commission's 2024 budget. And we have Corey Sharp to present.
Good morning,
Morning.
counselors. Thank you for allowing me to share the proposed budget, or I should say the adopted budget of the RDC. Joe, would you mind putting my slides up on the screen? You don't have? A long time ago, don't travel without adapters. All right. Sorry for the delay, counselors. Last month, I presented a proposed budget to the redevelopment commission. And this is the presentation that I gave to them. One addition.
I'm sorry, would you mind just introducing yourself real quick for the record? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm Corey Sharp, the director of the redevelopment commission for the town of Zionsville. Thank you for allowing me to do that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. If you don't mind, President Plunkett, I'd like to take a couple minutes and just go through this presentation in whole rather than glaze through it, because I think it's a good education opportunity for everyone. So the Redevelopment Commission by state statute has all of these powers. The Zionsville Redevelopment Commission has been using the powers checked in green: acquisition of property, selling that property, holding that property, and assisting the Zionsville Community Development Corporation over the last several years. What we have not been doing, but we plan on doing is this blue check mark, which is repair and improve property. And I'm going to walk through each of these items. Before I get into that, our source of income to date has been TIF monies, which is tax increment financing. Those TIF areas are located in 8 different economic development areas. They are scattered across town. The only economic development areas that have public bonds associated with them or have TIF coming in that is in excess of the debt obligations is the Zionsville EDA, the large pink one, the Oak Street EDA, and the Creekside EDA. I'm going to go through this in detail. So this is our budget in whole. Do not worry, I will go through this individually because I can't, you can't read it. But I just wanted to make sure that an entire budget was part of the record. So the Zionsville EDA is basically the village and then everything else in pink, which actually stretches all the way down to the interstate. It does not include Creekside. When it was originally created, it did include Creekside, but it was pulled out. The projected revenue in 2024 is just over $2 million. We expect to have almost $7 million of carryover from this year. So revenue to work with is $4.7 million. And then the debt associated with this TIF area is located there on the slide. Each year in the past, we have been granting $250,000 to the Zionsville Community Development Corporation, which was created to do a wide number of things. They are actually going to present next Monday to the RDC, their official acts. You'll see an additional $25,000 going to them here in a different EDA. Then real estate transactions and South Village planning, design, engineering. This $1.6 million of expenses is a placeholder for potential READY grant match dollars, READY 2.0. So a Zionsville EDA balance of $1.8 million.
Corey, can I have a question on that slide? So we approved a READY grant. Is that not that?
That is not this. So as we apply for READY 2.0, the first quarter of 24, we'll actually apply by the end of the year, the town will, then it requires match dollars, and we need to indicate match dollars for a READY 2.0. READY 1.0 is currently funding the engineering and surveying and design of the First Street realignment, which is in this EDA. It is south of Sycamore and stretches down to the bridge. And the engineers have just come under contract. That's $1.9 million for READY 1.0.
So is the revenue, is that 1.6 million, is there READY revenue that goes to the RDC if granted? Is that included in that 2 million in revenue? This is the match grant?
No. This revenue that you see at the top of the budget is all TIF revenue.
Got it.
READY 1.0 revenue goes to the town.
Got it. So what would the real estate transaction be in this model, or do you not know yet?
It is an opportunity for us to purchase properties associated with necessary right-of-way for the road realignment.
Got it. Thank you.
Welcome. The next EDA is the Oak Street area. This includes Town Hall. The current revenue annually and projected for 2024 is $230,000. This EDA does not have any bond obligations. It does have basically a complete turnaround of financing from TIF to help offset the town hall mortgage that was taken in 2016. The town hall mortgage, just to note, does have 3 other sources of funding. It's the local income tax, the town's general fund, and the food beverage tax revenue. I only note this because as we are looking forward and understanding what all the sources are available to pay the town hall, and we evaluate potential future projects in front of town hall for this quote unquote lot 2 opposite, or our empty lawn. We will be looking at TIF revenue and understanding if that's necessary for any future project. Our next EDA is the Creekside EDA. Annual revenue projected in 24 is $183,000, $401. We are expecting to carry over $12,609. We do have a commitment agreement with the schools that was associated with the initial purchase agreement, and that is to share the TIF revenue 50-50. So you'll see here that $91,700 comes right off the top and goes to the school. Then we have an economic development incentive of $75,000. This is the last payment that would go to Group 1001 as a part of the LIDS project. That was the first project, and they got an annual grant. Then you'll see here this $25,000, which is the remaining of the $250,000 grant to the Community Development Corporation. We'll have no other capital expenses, real estate transaction, or professional service fees associated with Creekside. And so we'll end the budget next year, around 4,000. So we're basically working this budget down to the pennies. We'll have more flexibility in the future with Creekside because the economic development incentive will expire. I will note that any EDA that we have in these boundaries that I'm mentioning is important because TIF, as it comes in, has to be spent in these areas. So Creekside money that comes in, the $75,000 that's about to expire, that money would have to be spent in Creekside. Then there's a series of economic development areas that were brought to the Redevelopment Commission, the council, and other commissions for approval that had developer-backed bonds. And we, in collection, made the decision to either give them 100% of the TIF or a portion of the TIF. The 334-700 EDA, this is the apartment project. And the developer gets 90% of the TIF to pay back, to pay their bonds that are due, and the RDC would keep $6,000. They also will have a balance carryover of $86,800. All of these funds coming in go towards their bond payment. And the reason why there's a balance carryover from this year is because the bonds don't start payment until 2024.
In that situation, when there's a balance carryover, can it only be spent in that EDA?
Yes.
Okay.
So the RDC's 10% there that you see on this line item, $6,000, that also can only be spent in this area. The next developer bonds are the MetroNet EDA. MetroNet cast a request for TIF bonds across the entire jurisdiction of Zionsville, and it was to bring fiber to the community. The revenue that comes in on that is $44,800. That just gets turned right around and gets paid towards the bond. There is no excess and no split on that TIF. Similarly is the 86th Street and Appaloosa EDA. What comes in goes right out to pay a developer bond. Holiday Farms EDA, the revenue coming in is $36,200. We do expect this might change because the county has been adjusting how the clubhouse is assessed and the golf course is assessed. They've also had a new daycare that went in. We'll see that in 25, but not in 24. The current balance is $437,000. There are no expenses with this area currently. The developer made the request to create the EDA and start holding the funds in this area. However, the developer has not issued a bond, nor has the RDC issued a bond that would cover this EDA. Counselor Garrett.
Corey, is there any ongoing discussion with Hankey Development about, I get this question a little bit, I don't want to speak for Brad, but I think he does too, about what is the intent? There was a lot of proposed projects when this was being proposed to the council, and nothing has been spent. So it's not like they've asked for things outside of what they propose, but I think there are folks in the community starting to understand like, well, all right, this money, this balance is coming. You know, what's the plan, and reiterate what our understanding was, that it would be for publicly accessible benefit, right? Public dollars, this is a private gated community with, you know, access to rails and trail trails and things like that. Can you speak to that yet, or is that confidential, or is that not really happening yet?
When I first started, August of last year, the Hankey development team reached out to me. We had a meeting and they presented a lot of different projects that could go towards that. They are capital projects that serve the community, you know, so it would have been trail connections in the community. They did not move forward with any of that. The town, and specifically DPW, has a need for increased sewer capacity as a result of the pace of what Hankey developed Holiday Farms. So we are evaluating how much can be generated out of this revenue to support a sewer main extension from Holiday Farms down to the plant, a line. That way we don't have capacity issues for the existing line. So we are under evaluation for that. I know that when Hankey presented the project, they gave a lot of different concepts. One of them was a bridge over Michigan Road. I can tell you this TIF will never it will never generate enough money to fund a bridge over the road. I know that Hankey owns property across the street. And as we're in discussions with them on how to utilize that, they understand that a safe road crossing is important. That might mean signalization, or using the existing signalized crossing, but an enhanced safe crossing area. We also have heard from the Pathways Committee that trails are important, and I know that that was mentioned at the last council meeting. They have not come forward and made an official request for TIF. I have asked them questions on.
Who's they? I'm sorry, you're talking about Hankey?
Development.
Got it.
Hankey Development, because they're the landholder. So, but we understand that there are immediate needs, sewer, safe crossing, and trail connections that need to be made. So as we evaluate how much this TIF can generate, how we can make those improvements happen.
And is the idea then to create like a sewer revenue bond or a TIF fund that would then pay for that? Because that's a pretty big upfront capital expense.
Yeah, it is. That's something that our TIF projections will tell us. We need to know how much funds can, you know, as a base, $400,000, and then going forward, how much can we lend out? And then it will TIF support that debt. If TIF is the only source, Councilor Garrett, then it would be a TIF bond. But if we need to look at other sources because it's not enough money, then it may be a different type of bond, like a sewer bond you mentioned.
Who drives that conversation? If, and I'm making this scenario totally up, if the Hankey Development Company says we want to do X and the town wants to do Y, who do we have to agree to it before it comes before a council for approval? Do they have to propose it, or do we have to propose it? Who's in the driver's seat here?
Right now, we're both sitting at the same table.
Okay.
And we're having open conversations. They understand the need of the sewer. I understand their desires, and the Pathways Committee's desire for trails and safe crossings. And so now it's just a matter of how do we make that all work?
Got it.
Corey, it seems that they would have anticipated. I know the project has moved maybe quicker than a number of people imagine that it might. Having been out there many, many times in the last few months, I mean, it's incredible the pace of growth. So I can imagine that there could be a sewer capacity issue, but was that always something that that was discussed as part of TIF solving? I guess that's the first I've heard that TIF would potentially be used for sewer capacity, that even though quicker than imagined, they would have, at some point we knew there would have to be sewer capacity growth to develop the entire project, or else it just, this may be more happening quicker than people imagine, but I guess I didn't imagine that TIF would be paying for that expansion. Seems like that would have been something that we would have anticipated, even if it were 2 or 3 years down the road.
It's a good question, Councillor Burke, and I am going to use as a reference, I'm gonna pull up the slide for the Zionsville EDA. The precedent has been set in Zionsville for TIF to assist with sewer work. And in 2010, there was a sewage works bond that dealt with projects in this EDA. And so as we're looking at opportunities to fund sewer work, TIF has been a discussion at the table because it is an infrastructure public asset.
Corey, do you have a list of the projects that were proposed in addition to the bridge conversation? Because it kind of seems like a bait and switch where we're talking about things that we propose to use these dollars for, and then a few years later we see another need, and then we just say, okay, there's been a precedent set for this. Let's switch it to that. And I don't think that's something that this council would agree to, but I'm curious about that. We talked about the bridge. What are some of the other, do you have that information? Because again, this is the first we've heard about using the dollars for sewer connectivity. And I'm just curious, you talked about a bridge, being not funded by this TIF, but a new sewer line to the sewer wastewater treatment, that's it's pretty heavy lift as well.
Right, and it would, my understanding is that this TIF would not be the only source for that sewer. But because it's being driven by Holiday Farms, it is a source that is being contemplated. In regards to your first question, yes, I do have a list. When the economic development area was approved, a list of potential projects is attached to it as an exhibit, as a part of those resolutions that were approved. I do not have that with me. I will make sure I share that with council today, and you'll have it for your record.
But just reaffirming it, that the sewer need was not in that list. We do know that, right?
I do not know that offhand.
Okay.
I do know that public infrastructure, is a part of that, and sewer would be public infrastructure. I just as a point of clarification, because for education, when we do projects like that, like a sewer that runs along an easement or along a road, the EDA needs to follow those same lines, because remember, we can only spend the money inside the EDA. So any decision that we make associated with this, if it is beyond these lines, we have to amend the actual EDA boundary as a separate resolution to make sure that all of those funds can be spent in that area. Okay, we have one more EDA, and it is the most current one, the Pittman Farm EDA. It does exactly what I just mentioned. It is primarily the old Pittman Farms at the southwest corner of 421 and Sycamore Street. But then you'll see it runs up the road so that we can capture additional resources to support the development in this area. So in this, you will remember that last year, council assisted the RDC with a development agreement split for the developer to receive 95% and the RDC to receive 5% to spend in this area. The developer has a bond. It is a draw bond, which basically says anything that they pull from this is what is due. So they have a cap and then whatever is drawn. Now they've made 3 draws from the RDC. I don't have that total number with me, but that's how this bond works. It's not a $3 million bond and they have set payments. It is whatever they pull from the pot is what they pay back. And they have 25 years to pay back that bond.
Is the RDC collecting interest income on that money before it's drawn? Do you guys have that sort of set up as a part of your process and or revenue projections?
It takes into consideration, it basically, that money flows in and out almost immediately. It comes in December and June, and bond payments are sequenced usually January, July, or in August and February. So we don't hold the money for long.
Okay.
Finally, I am thrilled to announce that we will have a new line item, a new bank account for cash. And currently the RDC has no cash on hand. All of the functions of the RDC have been TIF revenue approved. And so it's basically paying for bond payments, infrastructure, planning, professional services, things like that. We're projecting revenue coming in at just under $1.5 million. This takes into consideration that hopefully within the next 70 days, we will be closing on Lot 9 in Creekside, which we have a development agreement with Kendall Properties. And that will be their headquarters and then additional office space as well. And then the rest of this projection is our intent to sell lots 3, 4, 5, 7, and 8 in Creekside. So let me go back to that slide. Lot 9 that I just mentioned is underneath 183,000 of the budget line item. It's actually, oh no, it's not. It's just above that, Lot 9. Laser pointer, Lot 9. We currently have a letter of intent from Podell Partners for lots 4, 5, and 3. We are negotiating with them through a development agreement currently to see how this shapes out and potentially closing on that in the first quarter. And then lots 7 and 8. I did not include lots 2 or 1. They are by far the most difficult to sell. And so I figured patience would be better for that rather than being aggressive with our revenue.
Corey, do you know, out of curiosity, and this may be going down a different path, the 3, 4, and 5, and then even on 7 and 8, do you know if any of if that purchase agreement is going to be subject to any change in the PUD by the council or the RDC?
It's not my intent that everything that we have been evaluating that's come before us, one of the criteria we first look at is the PUD. And I asked for the planning staff to go through the PUD in detail against the Podell Partners project, and it all aligns.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. The professional services line item pays for legal and director expenses. So cash on hand at the end of the year.
Can you break that down, Corey?
Yep. Legal is at 6,000 a month. I'm hesitating. I don't know if it's 8, but at 6,000 a month, and director 15,000 a month.
That's so 15 grand a month, 180 grand. The mayor makes 130. I mean, I know this is you, so this is awkward, but that seems like a lot.
Well,
Is this a full-time position?
it is a full-time position, and you'll have to. It is a lot when you think about an employee. I am a consultant, so I carry all of those traditional expenses of an employee. So taxes, insurance, time off, things like that. So it's a matter of offsetting those expenses and then being competitive, and I would say at peer level with director expenses.
Has the RDC had discussions about making you or this position a full-time town position?
They have not. When I was first hired, I was hired as a consultant to advise in the transition between when the planning director had left and there was kind of this gap. And so it was myself that was hired to advise on redevelopment, and then Creek DeVolp was hired to advise on planning. Since that time, Director Dale has been hired as a staff person for planning department. And we continue to keep we changed my contract at that time, because at that time I was under contract with the town and the mayor. And now I am directly a contract with the RDC. So previously, the RDC director and planning director were one person. And it was paid out of the general fund, right? So all of your employees are paid out of the general fund. Now that there's two separate, we can offset those expenses with RDC cash on hand rather than having it be a town expense. Is this something that can be considered in the future? Absolutely. And if you would like me to take this to the RDC, I certainly can.
I don't know who should take it at RDC. I mean, and this is not a personal thing. It's not, you're not doing a bad job. It's just, I don't know, like if I look at the revenue at 1.45 and the contract is, call it 13% of the revenue, and it's not, and it's full-time, but it's not town employee, which I get the distinction between contractor and expenses. It just seems, without seeing, I guess I always just, I get comfort in what are other communities doing.
Yeah.
Right. And understanding that if this was a shared position that was paid for by the town, by shifting this to an RDC paid position, it's now 100%, like now you got two positions you got to pay for. It's still kind of town money as it is, right? RDC money, I consider town money, because if we're not paying as much, we can use it for other things around the town. It would just give me comfort, or maybe incoming council, incoming mayor, or future RDCs, if there was a comparison to say, what do other communities do, right? How is this position handled? Is this such a unique position? I know economic development is a unique position, and this is market. And if it's market, I have no issue with it, right? I just want to make sure we're not paying below or above market. I just want to make sure we are paying market.
Yeah, you are paying market. And I will provide you with a comparison of what other communities do.
That'd be awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that comparison needs to be relative to size, right? Like if you say that this is what Indianapolis pays and their RDC is 10 times our size versus Noblesville, Those are, I'd like a like for like comparison would be really helpful, Corey. I appreciate it. And again, nothing personal. I just want to know dollars and cents.
Absolutely. I'm all about comparison, as long as you allow me to compare based on redevelopment complexity versus like I think Noblesville is a great comparison because their RDC is doing projects. They've got the innovation mile that they're working on. They have active projects. Lebanon would be also a great comparison, but Whitestown may not be a good comparison because I don't know that their complexities are as intricate of what we're doing here in Zionsville. So
yeah, I think that complexity can be both a fact and subjective at the same time. So it would be helpful, I guess, to understand what does it mean by complexity. All of that, right? I mean, I'm not your boss at the end of the day, right? The RDC is, we just appoint members of the RDC, as does the mayor. They're the ones that ultimately make that decision, even if we have oversight to the budget. But making sure that everyone has a better understanding of, what does this mean related to complexity is helpful.
Yep, I will. I'll also include, you made the reference of the salary being 13% of cash, but
13% of revenue that you identified in that slide with the expense.
Yeah, for cash.
Not cash revenue.
It was cash.
That was a balance sheet. I thought that was a revenue statement.
Yeah, it was. This is so
it says revenue.
Right, for cash on hand. So it's cash only. It's unrestricted funds. So it's us selling property and it's unrestricted funds from the state.
Got it.
But there is $4 million plus in the Zionsville EDA. There is Creekside EDA. There are all of these that start to come on it. And I don't have a total.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be helpful, right? And some of that, and we're getting to semantics. I probably should stop, but like some of it's just auto, right? Auto in, auto out. So that's not real complex. I just want to, I'm looking for the ROI.
I like where you're going with the council here. And just some good data would be fun to see. I think population is one component to look at, but to your point, complexity and activity is different, but also maybe not even just budget dollars, but even like assets under management, like just a way to get a sense of, how much are you responsible for other than just cash? Because a lot of this is TBD, right? You're trying to build the ROI that doesn't exist currently.
Right. And actually, I think this will be, I'm planning on doing an RDC workshop for the newly elected individuals, for anybody, for the public, and then also the RDC appointments for next year. And so I'll make sure that this is included in that so that they also understand kind of big picture, the type of work that we're doing here in Zionsville and how they're paying for it.
Great.
Okay, I have a slide here on claims process as a result of a request from Councilor Plunkett. When we have claims for the RDC, we submit those claims to the Redevelopment Commission for them to act on, similar to the way that you just did in your council. They then are signed by our fiscal officer, which our treasurer is Cindy Poor, and that's per the state statute. Then also it is signed by the members that are there to approve. So I've included as an example this claims ticket from last month. Prior to getting on the agenda, the claims actually go through a town process. So the claims are received by me. I review them and pass them along to Director Dale with the town planning department. He reviews those and approves them to be placed on the RDC agenda. And then they are presented at the RDC meetings and voted on by the RDC. And then finally, claims are paid by the treasurer, Cindy. Are there any specific questions on the claims process? All right. So all in all, I understand you can't read this either, but these are the funds that the RDC is actively working with, not just TIF in and TIF out, turning that money for bond obligation. It's the Zionsville EDA, Oak Street EDA, Creekside, and then the cash on hand. One of the things that I like to do is budget 5 years out, which is why you see a 5-year lookout, because we have debt that carries through and debt that's coming off. We also have timelines that we have TIF districts that actually expire. So the Zionsville EDA is set to expire in the short term, actually, May of 2030. So we only have 6 more years of this EDA. Then I also include interest rate and payoff balance and any other key information that would help us financially project the next 5 years. As a part of our financial advisors' responsibilities, I asked them to produce an updated 5-year report in April. So we will have another lookout in 24 that will take us to 29. This information, I think, is helpful for the commissioners and the public to understand the obligations that are assigned to each of the districts, and then how are we planning going forward.
When you say financial advisor, is that a separate financial advisor from the town of the RDC, or is it the same?
Currently, it is the same, which is Crow. We are drafting an RFP for financial advisor services for 24. I expect that the commission to review that at their next board meeting in December, and then we will issue it and then have proposals for the new RDC to consider the first meeting in January.
Okay.
I'm just curious what drove that as far as the RFP process.
Yeah, we're just, I have received interest from multiple financial advisors. And so we're just doing our due diligence and collecting the data, making sure that we're being competitive in that process.
Thank you.
That concludes my presentation. Thank you again. I know that took a lot of time on your agenda, so I appreciate it.
Thank you. There, just note, counselors, there is no vote for this. So if you have questions or anything you'd like to run by Corey before she steps down, that would be pretty much it. Just for Corey.
Appreciate you coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, Corey.
All right, moving along here. Up next is a consideration of an ordinance approving an updated American Rescue Plan Act plan. This is ordinance 2023-29. This is a first reading, and this is, I believe we have Councilor Garrett.
Yeah, back to ARPA. So last meeting, we approved the ARPA plan for what I would call really kind of technically round 2. Round 1 was the employee bonus. And I sort of went through in my remarks earlier about what was in that plan, but it was basically things that were in the budget, pulled out of the budget and moved to ARPA. So everything from a transportation plan, a comprehensive plan, grants, pathways. So if you remember what I presented at our last meeting, it was effectively looking at, I had asked all of the department heads, the administration council, based on feedback we've gotten their budget requests, to give me their wish list of what they wanted remaining that we have not yet covered in budget or the ARPA round that we had just passed. And I got a great list. I think it was about $10 million in stuff. I looked at it and cut that list down to effectively the remaining ARPA dollars. That was what I presented at the council meeting. It was discussed amongst this council that I would reach out then to the department heads and get their feedback on what I presented. And in some cases, what I presented was what the department heads agreed with. And in other cases, there were a few tweaks. I did not get any feedback from the administration on that plan or those dollars. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to go through really quickly what those final dollars will cover and the tweaks that were asked compared to what I had originally presented, just so that we're all aware of this. So for CED, they have asked instead of the lease buyout for $30,000 that we instead help them towards a first floor redesign. Mr. Dale's asked that it will make his team more efficient. He thinks he can take care of the lease separately. This is the one thing that if you agree with councilors, we would have to modify in the motion due to travel and whatnot. We didn't get a chance to have that conversation until after the plan had to be submitted to Amy. So just be aware that is the one thing that is different than what was posted or presented. And we did leave in the town hall upgrades. These are little things, dishwashers, some desks, some fridges for his staff just to take care of them. DPW street, those remain the same. Those are all related to pathway construction. So one is a new pathway that is constructed along County Road 875 and Whitestown Road. That one is shovel ready, effectively. The other two are engineering. So that's going to provide future councils with the opportunity to fund these future grants if it comes through different organizations. One was for County Road 300 South. So that's from Appaloosa Crossing to Willow Springs Drive. And I want to clarify something because Vice President Burke and I had this conversation. This is Appaloosa going east on County Road 300, not going south along Michigan. There are intent and plans to do that, but in talking with DPW Superintendent Lance, NDOT, which owns 421, is going through the process of figuring out what to do with 421, given the growth there. He recommended, and I agree with, not making a plan for a pathway, whereas then the state can come in and totally rip that up based on their plans. So the idea is to let them get through their plans. And as Ms. Sharp talked about, there is a TIF potentially going through right now related to a development around Holiday Farms that could then fund that path, both the design and the actual development of it, as well as the crossing of 421 over to the west side of Zionsville. What this does is this gets us a head start to the east, which would let us connect into the 146th Street pathways and into the Carmel Trail system, which is miles and miles of trails. So he thought that was the best path forward. The other is for pathway segments along the Oak Street pathway, which I know President Plunkett, you've certainly been pushing for. So those two are engineering. The funding of those trails would still have to be found. For wastewater, there was a hoist and crane truck. That's an urgent need that they have. For finance, it is ARPA reporting oversight. That was something that Baker Tilly conveniently made as a recommendation that we heard from this morning to make sure that we are handling these funds, reporting these funds the appropriate way. For HR, it was leadership training. For IT, it is a network switch replacement, public meeting microphone system, fire station, training room, AV upgrades. Basically, the fire stations, the fire personnel won't have to leave there to do some of their training. Parks, there was a small change from what I presented last time, leaving the zero turn motor. We've actually taken away the mower for the golf course and replaced it with a nature center outreach vehicle. It's something that Superintendent Logston said was of more urgent need, and they have a backup plan if that mower were to break before they have plans to replace it in 2025, as well as a nature playground in the Carpenter Nature Center. That's a matching grant that we would also get. ZFD is probably the biggest change in talking with Chief Van Gorder. Well, I like the idea of buying land and holding on to it, and for when there may be a need for the fourth fire station. He did make the fair point that for them, they need to understand where to buy that land. And so I replaced that actually with reviewing the current fire station locations, facilities, equipment. This is not just for a potential fourth fire station, if it's needed or not, but really the entirety of ZFD. So I think it's a good exercise to help with future budgeting and for their planning, as well as some initial fire station design work. So that's replaced the land acquisition. ZPD remains the same. These are station upgrades, flooring, drywall, paint, roof replacement, garage doors. These are things that I'm told will allow the police station to get more years of use, another decade of use out of it instead of having to replace that. So I think that's money well spent. As I mentioned earlier, the biggest feedback we got during this process was trails. This plan represents over $2 million in trail investment if you count the last vetoed plan and this one, which is pretty unprecedented for new trail money outside of a budget process. As I mentioned earlier, this ordinance is a addition to the previous ordinance that the mayor vetoed. So if you like this plan, if you want to move forward with this plan, it will include everything that she vetoed. We will go through that process again, hopefully approve it here. We'll approve it in a second meeting. I'm hopeful that she doesn't veto it this time when she sees all these impacts that we'll have on the community. I don't know. If she does, we'll figure that out at that point. But I feel very good about how this is, and I appreciate all the department heads' work. I know you're busy giving me your feedback as well. So that's where we stand.
I've said this before. I certainly appreciate you doing the heavy lifting on the budget and a lot of this ARPA stuff. So I appreciate it. Are there any questions for Councilor Garrett?
Just clarifying, I know you just said it, but I want to hear it again. This restarts the process where she can veto again. Correct?
Yeah. So we
Because
would.
there's enough change.
Yeah, we'll vote on it here, assuming that we pass. It will be at the next meeting, assuming you still like it, and vote on it again. If it passes, she will have 10 days to sign, veto, or ignore. Ignore is effectively a veto. And at the last meeting of the year, we can decide if that's something we want to agree with or override. And all of these are 2024 expenses, so that delay won't make an impact. Heather, I have one quick question with a motion. I did make mention with CED that I want to make one change. Should I make that change in the motion or just make the change in between the two votes and then on the second vote note it?
I'd go ahead and make it in your motion.
Okay.
You want to make the motion?
Yeah, unless there's any other comment.
No.
Okay, so I would make a motion to pass ordinance 2023-29 on first reading with the amendment where it's notated in CED for replacing the lease buyout. I would like to change that to town hall first floor redesign and remodel. Both are for $30,000, so the dollar amount does not change, just the line item towards where that goes for does change.
I'll second that. First by Councilor Garrett, second by President Plunkett. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed. Okay. Up next is a consideration of an ordinance to revise regulations on nepotism. This is ordinance 2023-30. All of these next 5 items or 6 items or so, councilors, you'll recall, is an update of the code rewrite that to kind of shore up our ordinances and resolutions. So I'll let Heather take these and we'll just kind of fire right through them.
Great. The first one is an update on nepotism. So we are really not trying to change policy with any of these revisions. We're updating old language that refers to things like clerk treasurer or town marshal. And we've also gone back to ensure that the code is referencing the proper code site in state statute, as well as that it's correctly reflecting state statutes. So for nepotism, really what this draft is doing, it adds a section to clarify which department regulates and enforces the chapter. That's another change that you're going to see throughout these updates to provide more transparency for the public in terms of who's responsible. It makes a correction to a date referenced in section 4. It changes the reference clerk treasurer to mayor per the reorganization, and it corrects a reference in section 9 and states that it will take effect immediately. It had a delayed effective date because it was aligning to old state statute, but this has been in place for some time. So we're now making it effective immediately. And that is the only changes.
Thank you, Heather. This is first reading. Are there any questions for Heather?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
The first from Counselor Trailer, second by Counselor Garrett. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next is a consideration of an ordinance to revise town court. Ordinance 2023-31. Heather?
This one's even easier. It only adds a section to clarify what department is responsible for the town court.
Great. Any questions for Heather? I'll make a motion to approve. Second by Vice President Burke. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next is a consideration of an ordinance to revise general provisions of the traffic code.
So this draft does the following. It changes the name of the chapter from general provisions to general provisions in traffic control devices. It adds a section to clarify which department regulates and enforces the chapter. It has a grammatical correction in section 4C. In section 15, it clarifies that all traffic control signs, signals, and devices need to conform with Indiana code, as well as the Indiana Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices for Streets and Highways, which is a requirement in statute. And it adds a section prohibiting sign damage or removal that states no person shall, without lawful authority, attempt to, or in fact alter, deface, injure, knock down, or remove any official traffic control device or sign or any part thereof.
Thank you, Heather. Any questions, comments for Heather? I will make a motion to introduce on first reading ordinance 2023-32.
Second.
Second by Counselor Garrett. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next is the consideration of an ordinance to revise permits required for banners and signs.
Yep. So this adds a section to clarify which department regulates and enforces the chapter. It adds a new definition of banner in section 4 to mean a non-illuminated sign possessing characters, letters, illustrations, or ornamentations. Changes references in this section of clerk treasurer to mayor. And then I did note that this has a permit fee associated with it that has not been revised since 1996. So the council may want to go back, whereas the town's looking at the permit fees for 2024 may want to consider increasing that for inflation. But that change is not recommended here.
Thank you. Questions for Heather?
Just a quick question. I don't think this is in here, Heather, but like I know what came up as a hot topic over the last month or so, certainly on election day, were so many signs at town hall, a couple hundred. Does this, I don't think this addressed this, but it came up that the town could put some kind of ordinance in place that would limit, and I know other municipalities do, how many signs could be placed on municipal property. Is that something that would be amended into this section later, or is that a whole different?
I don't know if it would be in this section. I guess you could go back and amend it. It's not addressed here at all, but it would be separate.
But that is something we could.
Yeah, you definitely could regulate that. Other communities do that as well as in right of way owned by the town.
Okay, thank you.
But to Councilor Burke or Vice President Burke's question, would that be ordinance 2023-33 or is it in a separate ordinance that we would address it?
I would have to go back and confirm. I don't have the full ordinance pulled up in front of me.
Sure, it's all right. Thank you. Any questions from councilors? I would make a motion to introduce 2023-33 on first reading.
Second.
Second by Counselor Garrett. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed. Glad it didn't say anything about tow banners. Consideration of an ordinance to revise false alarms, false alarm fines. This is ordinance 2023-34.
So again, this adds a section to clarify which department regulates and enforces the chapter. It also adds a definition of what a false alarm is, which is previously referenced, but there wasn't a definition. And it states a false alarm means an alarm eliciting a police or fire response when the situation does not warrant such a response. And then this does not include triggers by severe atmospheric conditions or other circumstances not reasonably under control of the alarm user, installer, or maintainer. It also prohibits persons who owns or controls property on which an alarm system is installed to issue or cause to be issued a permit for the issuance of a false alarm, and then changes the reference from fire department chief to chief of the fire department to match the reorganization. And again, notes that the fee has not been updated since 1996, but does not propose any fee increase.
Thank you, Heather. Any questions from counselors?
Should we get some feedback from maybe the fire department on that for the price point? Like how much it costs for them to come out and make those services? That's
We
something,
do the fee ordinance at the beginning of the year, right?
Yeah, typically we do a fee ordinance at the beginning of the year, and this may
Yeah.
be something we would want the departments to look at, some of these older fees that haven't been increased in a number of years, just to make sure they're covering costs.
Yeah, and that's typically presented by the administration, the deputy mayor, and the mayor. So maybe we could have the new administration just kind of make note of some of these fees that have not been changed, I guess, in 20 plus years.
I'm happy to, for the incoming mayoral administration, we can go back through and note all of these fees that we've noted in each of these, just in a list, so it's convenient for the administration to review.
my only note on that is that if we want to probably get feedback from them on their expense versus just us inflating the cost because of inflation. So, but that'd be great. Thank you. I'll make the motion to introduce. Are you asking for that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Motion to introduce ordinance 2023-34 on first reading.
First by Counselor Melton. I'll second that. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed. Last item on for new business is a consideration of an ordinance to revise traffic regulations. This is ordinance 2023-35. And there are quite a few modifications to this one, Heather.
Yes, so this clarifies which department regulates and enforces the chapter. In section 5, it adds the Indiana code reference that gives the town the ability to regulate or prohibit the turning of vehicles at intersections and aligns that to state statute. It rewords section 6 to make it more straightforward, but is not designed to change the intent. It makes language more direct in section 9 by changing the phrase "the same" to "the vehicle" for better clarification. It rewords section 11 to try to make it more straightforward. Again, we're not attempting to change the intent, and that is it.
All right. Any questions for Heather?
Heather, I know, unrelated to this, but I know this has been a long time coming to make all these changes. Are there a bunch more coming?
There are.
Okay.
There are a bunch more coming.
That's fine.
I figure we
I'll
split
try to
them up
go
a
as
little bit.
quickly, and we'll have a memo that clarifies each of them like we did, but
I'm happy to get through them. I mean, it's needed. I was just curious. So thank you.
we've rewritten everything at this point, so just get through them all.
All right, any questions for Heather? I'll make a motion to introduce ordinance 2023-35 on first reading. Second by Vice President Burke. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next is other matters. Are there any other matters for counselors? Once, going twice. Up next would be the approval of claims. I do have a couple of things, obviously, both from the beginning of this meeting and then another modification on claims. Are there any questions from other counselors? Cindy, I noticed that we've got in the non-department legal, I know we'd moved some of the Barnes and Thornburg claim for the code revision to town council. There's still another one remaining there. The APV 4468 is to Barnes and Thornburg for the code rewrite and should be under ours. That number is $3,713.50. So are there any other questions for counselors? Otherwise, I'd make a motion with this modified introduction here, if that's all right. I will make a motion to approve claims with the following amendments. We move the APV 4468 to Barnes and Thornburg from the non-department legal Item to the town council legal budget 101-120-311. I would also add to the claim from the non-department legal, which is 101-999-311 in the amount of $34,117.99 as a claim paid to Chief Van Gorder.
Second.
Second from Counselor Garrett. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed.
Make a motion to adjourn.
First by Counselor Garrett. I'll second that. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed. The next regular town council meeting is scheduled for Monday, December 4th, 2023 at 7 p.m. in the Zionsville Town Hall Council Chambers. Public notice will be posted in compliance with the Indiana Open Door Law. Thank you.